Welcome to Bible study. This is the study we're preparing for September 29th, the festival of St. Michael and all angels, which we're going to celebrate with a special service and a dinner that day, so hope you can come. But today we are looking at a very interesting little bit of the first book of Samuel, which is in chapter 2. You may want to turn to that if you have a chance to grab your Bible and open that far. But you'll notice that I'm standing in the back of church while I'm doing this, and you can see over my shoulder here the sort of the view that a parishioner has when you come to church on Sunday morning. The church is set up for a festival day, so the paraments have changed. Today we're going to consider a song which was sung by a humble woman, by a regular person, and this is the song of Hannah upon the birth of her miraculous child, Samuel, when she brought him to the temple or to the tabernacle and handed him over to Eli in the fulfillment of the vow she had made as she in her distress had prayed for the birth of this child. On Sunday, when we talked about that first chapter, we spent some time looking through the chapter asking who were the people in it who looked like exile people. Who were the folk who had been taken from their home, so to speak, and who were out of place? Because we think that this book is best read as a book written for the traumatized and exiled people of Judah in Babylon. That as these books achieve their final shape, they seem to have been written for that community. That's not an absolute certain, but it surely answers many of the questions that one finds in these texts, and it makes the most sense of some of the things that we read there. We notice that Hannah, in her childlessness, looked like those exiled people who had lost their children to the ravages of war and exile. That as she was mocked and ridiculed by her fellow wife of Elkanah, that they would have endured such mockery. We know they did. You can read about it in Psalm 137. But also that Samuel himself, taken from his parent by a vow and delivered to Eli, looked a little like an exile. Today, as we consider this psalm, which it's what it really is, it's a psalm, it's a song sung by Hannah, we want to put ourselves into the shoes of those exiled people, but not necessarily to imagine we lived 2,600 years ago when God's people of old were brought into exile, but to remember the places in which we feel that we are out of place, that we are out of home, that we are uncomfortable in this world in which we live. For that too is a form of exile, that exile in the biblical metaphor, in the biblical message, becomes this image for what it means to be away from our home with Jesus, that promised land that God has spoken about to us, that as long as we are in this pilgrimage, in this place, that we will always feel somewhat out of place, not quite belonging, because it is not really our home. And so, as we read this, I want you to think not only of Hannah and of those people in exile, but also of us, and how this does not always feel like home for us. For Samuel, chapter 2, the song, the prayer of Hannah. So they had gone up and delivered to Eli the son that Hannah had borne. And she brought him to him, and she said, "O my Lord, as you live, my Lord, I am the woman who is standing here in your presence praying to the Lord. For this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition that I made to him. Therefore, I have lent him to the Lord. As long as he lives, he is lent to the Lord. He is no longer really mine." And he worshiped the Lord there. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord, my horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation." For Hannah, of course, here she was, this barren woman who in the ancient world that would have been a terrible curse, understood to be a curse from God, to be a barren woman, because children were so much wrapped up into what it meant to be a human being, but also they were your social security. They were your future. They were the ones who were your stability. But now her horn is exalted, and her strength is secure. Her mouth derides her enemies. Peninnah, that other girl who was taunting her because she had no children, those Babylonians who are accusing the people of old, who are taunting them for the loss of their homeland, the world, which derides us for getting out of bed on a Sunday morning when we could sleep in or go golfing. My mouth derides my enemies because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none beside you. There is no rock like our God. Hannah knows that there is only one who can really solve the problems that she faced. There's only one who could solve and bring the people home from exile. There is only one rock who can answer our questions, our existential questions of life, death, of sin, and a world whose brokenness bites us so hard. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth. You can see her casting her eye down the pew to that other wife of Elkanah, her husband. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. He knows all, he sees all. There is no hiding from him. Speak not arrogantly, she says. Let no arrogance come from your mouth, for God sees through it all. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those people in exile, their bows had all been broken. Their armies had been enfeebled. Their men had been slaughtered. And now here they were in a distant land, slaves, powerless, unable to even go home. And Hannah sings, and the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. She sees this great reversal, this great turning upside down of all that is to come, of all that we see around us. The billionaires and the people who seem to control this world in which we live, the powerful, the mighty, the one with the biggest weapons who terrorizes those who have nothing. It all turns on its head. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and he raises up. All of this is in God's hands. He is the Lord of all. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. The people of old who were sitting in the dust, in the ash heap of their grief and their sorrow after the exile, but also those who sit in the grief and the mourning of today. Hannah says he lifts them up. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in the darkness. For not by might shall a man prevail. God's kingdom comes not in power, not in that kind of power anyway, but it comes, as Paul says, when Jesus empties himself, becomes subject, has a cross strapped to his back and forced to carry it up a hill, and cruel men pound nails through his hands and feet and leave him there to die. He looks like an utter failure in weakness, humility, and death. But, she says, not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. That temple, that curtain in the temple torn from top to bottom. The adversaries of the Lord shall not prevail. They do not have the last word. That belongs to him alone. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Notice how at the beginning it was her horn that had been anointed because she had borne this child. But now the anointed one, the anointed one is lifting up his horn. It is the Messiah is the word for anointed there, you see. It is Jesus whose horn is lifted high in resurrection, in parousia, in his reign as the Son of God. The text tells us that when Hannah was done praying, Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest. We'll go in a little bit farther into the world of Eli and that Samuel lived in, and some of the things that goes on there. But I wanted to spend this time in this prayer and to know that spoken to by Hannah, but to those people in exile and to all of us who experience that exile. It's worth just slowing down and reading it. Pray it. Enjoy it. We'll see you on Sunday.